Hello to all the science enthusiasts out there in this cosmology group page. I have been kicked off all the groups that contain quantum physics in their name, and I left the other group named cosmology. I recently scraped together some animation stuff I was about to archive until I could get around to redoing and hopefully doing a much better job of explaining my theory of gravity. But instead, I made a potpourri of videos, and now, at the risk of getting the boot from this group as well, I thought I would present to you my theories, and also explain why I believe that science at its fundamental basis is being kept a secret. This first animation is 1 minute long and talks about the negative charge that surrounds each atom and molecule. This negative charge prevents atoms and molecules from ever actually touching because they are repelling one another. It is also this negative charge which my theory of gravity says is attracted by the center of gravity, which you will hear a lot about. My theory states that gravity is the positive charge of protons, organized into a focal center, pulling on the negative charge of atoms and molecules, located at the ground state, outermost electron shells. All of this space between adjacent molecules is a function of negative charges mutually repelling at the outermost ground state electron shells. This negativity is attracted by the focal center of positive charge that we call gravity. Gravity is the center of positive charge of protons in any object, and that positive charge of the mass of protons is organized into a focal center and attracts the negativity of the outermost ground state electron shells of molecules only. Each object in the universe has a center of mass and a center of gravity. Gravity is in fact something as simple as positive pulling on negative. It is the superconducting environment of absolute zero below ground state which is responsible for organizing the positive charges of protons into a focal center. This next video is a clip from the Public Broadcasting Network where Nobel Prize winner Eric Cornwell describes the waves of one atom combining into the waves of other atoms until you can't tell one wave from another. Although he falls short of calling them gravity waves, or the waves of proton positive charge, it is obvious that he is saying that the superconducting environment of the atomic nucleus, which he refers to as the quantum world, organizes the waves of atoms into a focal center. In my theory, this is what I call the center of gravity. It is the positive charge of protons organized into a focal center, and attracting the negative charge of ground state electron shells.
Here is a demonstration of the difference between the environment below ground state compared to the environment above ground state. Now, listen to what Nobel Prize laureate, Eric Cornwell, has to say about the positive waves of atomic nuclear protons, organizing into a center of gravity within the superconducting environment of the atomic nucleus.
You can think of it this way. In the ordinary world, you, me, atoms, anything you want, they're kind of like balls, just like these balls here. They bounce, they roll around, they bash off each other. But in the quantum mechanical world, each of the atoms starts to act more and more like a wave. And eventually, the wave of one atom starts to grow into the wave of the other. And before you know it, and you can't tell one from the other. The atom could be over here, or it could be over there. And the cool thing is it could in some sense really be both at the same time.
Both at the same time?
Yeah.
I mean, how can something be in two places at once?
It's not something we understand that well either. We just go with it.
No
Quantum mechanics
kidding.
is like that, yeah.
Do you see that moon over my shoulder? It has gravity pulling slightly on my back, but the planet below me has a center of positivity tugging on my breast's outermost ground state electron shells, causing them to sag a lot. It is the Earth's positive charges, organized into a center, a small spot at the center of the Earth. In regard to gravity, let us talk about these two objects. What I mean is, the Earth and the Moon. Both the mass of an object and the gravity of an object are organized about a center. There is a center of mass and there is a center of gravity for each object in the universe. This is a universal finding. Mass is determined by the number of protons, mass determines gravity, and so it is reasonable therefore that gravity is determined by protons, it is not. Protons, mass, gravity. Protons are at the center of each atom making up molecules, and for some reason the mass of protons constituting each object becomes organized into a center of mass as well as a center of gravity. Since we associate the positive charge with the proton, can we theorize a way for the positive charge to sum into a center of gravity and then postulate a mechanism for that to function as what we call gravity? It is obvious that gravity is something as simple as positive pulling on negative. But you need to be aware that the accepted theory of science is that gravity is a magical mystery, which no human can comprehend. Well, after you see this presentation, you will have no doubt that gravity is the center of positivity pulling on the outermost ground state electron shells of molecules, and there is nothing mysterious about that.
Just as the center of positivity attracts the negativity of ground state electron shells of all neutral molecules, it also repels the positivity of outer electron shells of positively charged ions. In the high atmosphere called the ionosphere, where solar photon bombardment is intense, molecules such as diatomic oxygen tend to separate into positive and negative ions. In this next video the aerospace scientist talks about this and the center of positivity repelling these positive ions off into space.
I'm Glyn Collinson from NASA's Goddard Space Flight Center. We're going to have to talk about two forces of nature. Firstly, the force of gravity. Gravity is the thing which is holding you down to the planet, but if you think about it, it's also what is holding the atmosphere down onto the planet as well. If I want to remove some of the oxygen from the planet, we have to overcome that gravity. So to do that, I want to talk about the electric force. And what we think can happen is that the electric force can help push on the ions and in the upper parts of the atmosphere, push them off and up into space. So just as every planet has a gravity field, we think that every planet has a weak electric field. It's a monster of a force. It can rip heavy things like oxygen straight out of the upper atmosphere and send them kicking and screaming off into space. So this really changes the way we have to think about planets, because it turns out that planets can lose heavy things like oxygen to space entirely through electrical forces in their ionospheres. This is something that's really important if we want to go looking for exoplanets, for habitable planets around other stars. It is no good having conditions perfect for an ocean and an atmosphere that you might want to breathe if some invisible force is going to come along and rip it all off into space. Only understanding how atmospheres evolve can we try and understand how we got here.
The guy from NASA stated that there is an electric force which is repelling the positive ions off into space. Now let us guess what that electric force might be. There are, in fact, only two choices, either positive force or negative force, and, of those two, only positive charge can repel positive ions. Once again, he falls short of calling this positive force the force of the charge of gravity, does he not? And to conclude, I wanted to remind the viewers of why science has been kept secret, especially at the most fundamental components. The one fundamental is gravity. I will show a clip that states that the corporation uses secrecy to protect its electronics monopoly, and then I will show a video I made for the administrator of the other cosmology group as I left. George and I had discussed collaborating on a project, but when he referred me to the Einstein Institute I realized that was futile. There I show how Einstein and Hubble were both at the corporate headquarters located in the inner city of London, a small patch of land where the headquarters of global Freemasonry is also located. George, since you directed me to an article by the Einstein Institute, I got the sinking feeling that a collaboration between us would be unlikely. Einstein was a corporate loyalist, and after he did some great work along with his mentor, James Clerk Maxwell, he set off doing corporate bidding. Maxwell was the first one given the opportunity to become famous with a version of E = mc², but he refused. Einstein must have then been given an offer he could not refuse and, consistent with his sense of humor, used c for the speed of light. C as in Clark and C for the job he held in the patent office, which was Clark. His next theory on gravity, which makes no good sense, I will include herein, and also I will show you how it was Newton's E equals 1/2 mv squared from which E equals mc squared was derived. If you will just work out the units for yourself, you will find a two-dimensional component. Newton himself abandoned E equals 1/2 mv squared, and it does not even appear on Wikipedia, and Einstein's only mentioned as a famous formula. Neither formula has ever been used except to introduce the confusion of kinetics into quantum physics. Einstein introduced the theory of dark matter, which I use today as a model in my theory of the primordial particle. Einstein had to withdraw from dark matter, calling it the biggest mistake he ever made. Einstein was there in London when they were coming up with the expanding universe theory. The corporation is headquartered in the inner city of London, also called the Corporation of London. The corporation is what they call themselves. The Big Bang is still a viable theory, however the expanding universe does not hold up. The cosmological redshift has not held up as true.
E equals mc squared was conceived by this man. Leszek.
It was Einstein.
Good.
Running MC for 2000.
The equation's insight into the behavior of light was an extension of the work of this three-named Scot around 1870. Leszek.
It was James Clerk Maxwell.
You got it.
In 1927, a Belgian priest, the Abbé Lemaitre, as he later became, also discovered these solutions. And he went to England, and his work was publicized in Cambridge and elsewhere, and the famous English astronomer Sir Arthur Eddington and others got to know about this, and they immediately began to say, how can this apply to the current universe? Well, in the same period, in 1929, Hubble, he showed that if you look at the spiral nebulae, the faint spiral nebulae, the shifts in their spectra are proportional to their apparent brightnesses. And this led very soon to the idea that this fitted very well with the expanding universe, and that indeed this is the kind of universe we lived in, that what we were looking at are galaxies, Milky Ways, further and further away from us, and the further away from us, the larger the redshifts, and if that's interpreted in the way that most people would interpret it, this means that they are moving away faster and faster. So this was the original idea. By the 1930s, the front page of the New York Times said we live in an expanding universe.
The thing to remember is that basically there is no understanding of gravity. Newton was wise enough not to propose any theory. He just said that here's an equation, my law of gravity if you like, and it works. But I make no hypotheses. Unfortunately, those who came later were prepared to follow Newton's path and feel that they had explained gravity, when in fact they hadn't. Einstein's theory doesn't explain gravity. It has matter somehow affecting space in a way which is completely unphysical, in other words, warping empty space. There's no explanation as to how this might happen or what it even means. So we have more equations, but without any real meaning.
And now, George Dishman, I bid you farewell. You were both pleasant and respectful toward me as well as loyal to the corporation, thus achieving both of your goals. I will withdraw my membership. And now, at the risk of getting kicked out of this cosmology group, I am going to play a 12-minute animation I did. It opens with humor to make it fun, but quickly ramps up to include corporate motives and their relation to Freemasonry. If you are interested, these and other animations can be seen at my timeline, and I also have a science theory group here on Facebook. For the next few months I will be involved in dieting and exercise, and so will likely not be creating new animations. I am studying the iClone animation software and have a long way to go there. I will use this time to gather additional evidence on my theory of gravity, that gravity is the center of positive charge organized into a focal center, and attracting the negativity of the outermost ground state electron shells. Here is just a thought I was having today. Let's suppose that the primordial particle, before nuclear fusion has occurred, contained a positive component and a negative component which were not as yet separated out but contained in the same shell. In this scenario, there would only exist attraction between the opposite charges. Unable to move in relation to one another, they would not be capable of inducing an electromagnetic field. However, after fusion of protons has separated the two component charges, that superconducting electromagnet that we are so familiar with kicks in. However, again, the first product in nuclear fusion must have been the hydrogen molecule, and not the hydrogen atom, because 2 electrons are required for the repulsive force that induces the electron shell. Give me your thinking on this, and next time we will take up nuclear fusion formation of the helium atom and see if we can still eliminate the need for the theoretical neutral particle, the neutron. Nuclear fusion is not exactly what it sounds like. Protons do not ever join together physically except by way of consolidating the positive charges, which is a different thing entirely. Nuclear fusion happens in the heart of suns where pressure produces conditions allowing for a group of protons to capture a compatible number of electrons. Once this group of positive and negative particles bonds electrically by charges, positive and negative, the now inner electron shells binds the protons in an eternal embrace which cannot be broken unless that element of the periodic table once again goes through another round of nuclear fusion within the heart of a star. Because there are fewer electron resonances available within the heavier elements past hydrogen, after nuclear fusion, photons are liberated. Exactly where light comes from has been kept a secret from you. Also, uranium is only fissionable because it is already falling apart. There actually is no such thing as nuclear fission.
Nuclear fusion not only produces elements of the periodic table according to the number of protons fused, it also liberates photons. Didn't you ever wonder where all of this light came from? Light is photons. I'm standing here in the atomic nucleus, in the superconducting environment of absolute zero. I am among the protons and the inner electrons, and their shells. There are no electron shells available for photon absorption and re-emission, and so, any incoming photons just zip right on through. All heat occurs above me, at the ground state electron shell. Above ground state, photon absorption and re-emission occurs billions of times per second, and that is the only place in the universe where heat occurs. Where I am standing, the environment is one of absolute zero, and this environment causes the positive charge of these protons to organize into a center of positivity. That center of positivity is what we call gravity, but that is a secret that the corporation does not want you to know about. The corporation has a monopoly on electronics and uses that monopoly to keep a profile on everyone on Earth. Above ground state there is no organization of the negative charge that exists there, because of the heat. Now, allow me to switch camera views to show you an example of solar nuclear fusion which is happening right now, next to me. Once these protons capture the proper number of electrons, they will become an element of the periodic table, and this union cannot be broken unless that atom goes through another round of solar nuclear fusion, and most scientists believe that the heavier elements have formed in that way. Behold, the outermost ground state electron shell where all of chemistry, heat, and the transfer of force between objects happens. It is also the location of the valence junctures between the covalent bonds of atoms making up molecules. It is the location also of the newly formed temporary electron shell which pops up each time a photon is absorbed there. That action is known as heat, matter in motion. It is the only place in the universe where photon absorption and re-emission occurs. The zone that forms between ground state and the newly formed higher electron shell I have given the name intersol. In this discussion of my own theory of gravity, I will include video clips from other educational programs as well as videos and pictures that I have produced in my animation software. We will talk about matter and energy in its different forms, beginning from my theory of a primordial particle which is based upon an existing theory of dark matter. There will be a discussion of what nuclear fusion is, what heat is, and what superconductivity is. While these may seem like difficult subjects in quantum physics, I will make very simple descriptions about why gravity can only be the positive charge of protons organized about a focused center, and then attracting or pulling on the negative charges located on the outermost ground state electron shells. The positive charge of gravity is well organized into a center, while the negative charges stay put, dispersed throughout any object. We will say a lot about the superconducting environment of absolute zero below ground state, and why true superconductivity is not possible above ground state. Here is a demonstration of the difference between the environment below ground state compared to the environment above ground state. Now, listen to what Nobel Prize laureate Eric Cornwell has to say about the positive waves of atomic nuclear protons organizing into a center of gravity within the superconducting environment of the atomic nucleus. Now let's watch the next video where Nobel Prize winner Eric Cornwell tells us about what happens below ground state in the atomic nucleus where the environment is absolute zero. When he uses the phrase the quantum world, he is referring to the atomic nucleus where the waves of one atom grow into the waves of other atoms making up objects. He falls short of calling them gravity waves or waves of the positive charge because that would be revealing the secret they are keeping from the students of quantum physics. It is important to those who have the monopoly on electronics and many other important monopolies to keep secrets to protect all of their monopolies. Can you guess who in your communities and in the Beltway have taken solemn oaths and vows to keep secrets and tell lies? I can. I know.
That is quantum mechanics in action.
As I'm discovering, quantum mechanics is a kind of physics where the usual rules don't apply.
You can think of it this way. In the ordinary world, you, me, atoms, anything you want, they're kind of like balls, just like these balls here. They bounce, they roll around, they bash off each other. But in the quantum mechanical world, each of the atoms starts to act more and more like a wave. And eventually, the wave of one atom starts to grow into the wave of the other, and before you know it, and you can't tell one from the other. The atom could be over here, or it could be over there. And the cool thing is it could in some sense really be both at the same time.
Both at the same time?
Yeah.
I mean, how can something be in two places at once?
It's not something we understand that well either. We just go with it.
No
Quantum mechanics
kidding.
is like that, yeah.
Rachel, this year marks the 300th anniversary of the third degree of Freemasons, and many families such as mine go back to near the beginning. Many generations ago a male ancestor brought his entire future male lineage into Freemasons, and we have all been indoctrinated ever since. It gets easier when you are raised into it.
Keeping secrets? Telling lies? You mean?
Wait, hold it a moment. Rachel, you made the statement that neither the electron shells of the atomic nucleus, nor the protons are available for photon absorption. Could you tell us why that is, and why that fact creates the absolute zero environment below ground state which organizes the protons into a center of positivity that we experience as gravity?
Well, yes, it is as simple as, after nuclear fusion, the electrons below ground state are completely tied up with maintaining nuclear fusion in their embrace with nuclear protons. The negative charges are balanced with the positive charges of the nuclear protons, and their electron shells have nothing left to offer. The inner electron shells are in perfect balance and at the quantum distance, and so no further interactions are possible. Nuclear fusion joins the inner electrons tightly with the nuclear protons, perfectly balancing positive and negative charges. It is only the outermost ground state electron shells which have the freedom to participate in photon absorption and re-emission, and this creates the possibility for molecular chemistry which makes life possible. Right now I am standing in the center of the Sun, observing nuclear fusion taking place, and even though these protons are under tremendous pressure, none are ever harmed. There are no crippled protons running around because heat is not possible in regard to protons. Heat only happens at the ground state of atoms. We humans are afraid of heat because it can severely damage the molecular structure of organic material. This is known as denaturing. When organic molecules are rearranged, they can no longer properly function, and this may result in injury or even death. This is an organic molecule, known as glucose. In its crystalline form it is white, because of the many hydrogen atoms whose optical property is to re-emit all frequencies of photons from its ground state electron shells, which we see as white. If there are too many photons creating matter in motion, the hydrogen can shake loose and be liberated, exposing the carbon skeleton, whose optical property is to re-emit visible light as infrared frequencies, which we see as black. Coal was once glucose, but it lost most of its hydrogen and went from white to black. The organic molecule of cellulose is what I am referring to. It was made of long chains of glucose which once were white but turned to black as heat and pressure drove off its hydrogen as it turned into coal. Let's watch an animation of heat driving off hydrogen from this molecule of glucose and watch it turn from white to black.